Hi, everyone, and welcome to Liberatory Love Coaching. So, what is the purpose of this coaching? What will it look like? What should I bring to the table? So, I want to just tell a little story to answer some of those questions. And I'll tell the story about myself. That way, you can also notice what in you might be attracted to this space. And you can bring the parts of you that will best be served in working with me. And I say this because there are so many people that will be great for us to work with in our lives. Just like we go to a dentist and a doctor and a gynecologist, and we don't expect one person to do all those things. My vision for the future is, as our understanding of the mind and the body and the spirit and consciousness and however we talk about what is beyond the physical expands, so will the ways in which we address ourselves. And right now, as humans, we tend to talk about a therapist or not having a therapist, and it's as if it's an option. Like, some of us see therapists, some of us are on medications, and some of us are not. And it's an either or choice. But we don't do this about doctors. We don't say, I shouldn't speak as someone who's been traveling around the world and doesn't have consistent medical care. But for the most part, it's strange to say, I don't have a doctor. You're not considered any less human because you have a doctor or have to see a doctor regularly. That's a part of having a human body that is growing and changing. So that's something first to know about my approach in general to psychological care, is that I believe that the tools we have right now are limited, but also expanding. And when I'm inviting anyone to work with me, it's not because I think that I will save you or that I have all the tools for you. It's because there's something at this moment that, given my experience, I'm able to offer you. And I just want to be clear about that because um, in a world where marketing is so prevalent, and so we're constantly hearing stories, and the way mass marketing works, we tend to hear things like, this is why I'm the best person for you to work with on XYZ subject. It's really important for me to say, I might not be the best person to work with you. I 100% might not be the best person to work with you. Either way, I will still try to help you find the right person or encourage you to get other help. But within the space of coaching, it actually really matters that I work with the people who the timing is right for us to work together, or the attraction is right based on your needs and what I have to offer. Scope matters, and it's a little bit more challenging to develop scope in the space of mental and emotional work than it is, let's say, in fitness and nutrition. So I'll just give a quick comparison, and then I'll tell a story about myself so you can see if you want to work with me. So I'll give it an example quickly about getting trained in physical fitness versus getting trained on mental issues and mental and psychological and creative issues. When I'm working on my certification, which I'm not yet complete in, but for NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine, when I do my coursework there's explicit boundaries, right? And this is when someone should work with an actual nutritionist, and this is when someone would come to a nutrition coach. So if something's going deeply wrong within the body and someone actually needs to have a new diet based on, let's say, allergies or a drastic medical change, then they should go to a formal nutritionist who can work with them on those needs and disorders. But if someone just wants to become healthier, which already is a hard task, then a coach makes sense, because you don't need someone who knows the ins and outs of a gluten-free diet or certain type of medical concerns to be able to work with you on the mental and emotional things and the rewiring of your life and the redesigning of your life that nutritional change takes. So this is a an obvious one. Same with personal training and physical therapy. And again, it can still be complex, but it's generally easier to say that's out of my scope of work, right? Physical therapy and personal training. If you have a deep injury, then me as a personal trainer is not going to be the best person for you to heal that wound, because you should work with someone who's specialized on that thing. Years ago, actually, when I was a fitness instructor in upstate New York, there was a woman who decided to come and do her physical training with me, her physical therapy with me, overseeing a personal therapist. What is that called? Sorry, a physical therapist. And it was strange. It was an interesting exploration of how much the mind and body does matter, right? Because I wasn't trained as a physical therapist, but I knew the basic exercises that need to get done. And I spent time with her, and she was like, I know what the exercises are anyway, and I'd rather get to do that work with you. So in that case, it was a small enough issue that I could work with her on that. But if it was out of my scope, I wouldn't. So I just offer that up because we don't have yet this type of understanding around the nuances within the mental health space. And so that's because we're still discovering what it is that the human mind, consciousness, energy, spirit even looks like. And depending on what environment we go in, whether we go to a church or a spiritual environment or a psychological environment, we're going to get different tools and different frameworks for what we even are as a human and how to face that. Or I should also add on there, like personal development, self-help. And so this makes us, I believe, like necessarily skeptical of mental health practices, period. And especially things that are coming from institutes. Many of us don't want to get prescribed or described as having a condition. And there's learning that's happening there. And it's okay that it's confusing and it's hard. It's also important to break down stigmas within the space of mental health, but it's also important to recognize there are other tools, there are other ways for us to be worked with than just the traditional psychological model. And that's what I want to open up. So I'll now, on that long route, tell a story about myself and why I even gave all of that information. I've been dealing with, I guess I'll just make this story a bit about my mental health journey, which is my life story. I cannot disconnect the two. Ever since I was a child, I've dealt with the effects of bipolar. And it feels so vulnerable to say that, because to even name that feels like, well, then go and figure that out and put a label on it, or don't put a label on it, or get medication or don't get medication. And a whole bunch of binaries pop up. And within those binaries of choices that my mind creates, there's also binaries around expression. Do I express this? Do I talk about this? Do I not talk about this? It's vulnerable. It's scary. What's the implications on my professional life? And there's genuine fear that runs through my body from my stomach all the way to my chest. And that fear on one level is the social implications, the judgments, the stories, the thoughts, the thought of this literally affecting my entire livelihood and whether or not I can bring in money or not, whether or not I could get a consistent job or not, all based on social perceptions. And then on just a personal level, there's the beating of my heart because of my own fear of this experience. Because when I'm in this experience, it's scary. And there's my larger fears underlying that, of not just being in the experience, but of being trapped and being unable to get out of it. And then the third level of fear is, and I actually have to like pause to feel into this one. The third level of fear is socially, is friendship wise, relationship wise. It's honesty. What does honesty look like in this experience of life that I go through? And the decision to express or not express, and the perceived judgments and fear of non-belonging and fear of misunderstanding. And all of these fears are real. So why am I sitting in front of a camera and choosing to share about them? Because learning to get into somatic works as an adult, as a 28-year-old, has been the first place for me that I've been able to acknowledge that there's an experience that I go through mentally, but there's another experience that I go through in the experience of my body, which is around my fear of what's happening in the mind. And they're not the same thing. And prior to me being able to differentiate those two things, they felt like the same thing. So the experience of actually having an extraordinarily wide spectrum of emotion that hits me in very intense ways, and the impact that it has on me professionally and socially, personally, and socially. And then also my judgment around that as the same experience. And they're not. My perceived judgment of that is now its own experience. So there's the bipolar or mental experience of intense spectrum of emotions. That's one thing. And then there's my fear of the thing and my fear of the impact on me. And I'm still learning how to navigate this, but it's really important for me to express this as I open up the space to coach and work with others and humbly acknowledge where I'm at now and where I want to go, and make the decision for myself that I am qualified to start now from where I'm at, and that this journey is messy, but also can be so beautiful. So I've lived with this experience my whole life. And because I've chosen at this moment in my life not to get help from the traditional medical model, I'm not against it. I have several siblings who are working within that model, and I'm not against it, and I'm staying open to it. But I've also chosen to look for holistic and alternative approaches right now. I've learned my own tools and tactics to manage and work with this. And then I, as an adult, getting out of college, got to begin to go deeper into holistic health and holistic exploration. And they're actually traveling and studying in different cultures, and beginning to learn about Eastern philosophy and views of the body and mind, and expand and open my perspective of what the mind is. And I have to just pause here as well, just to notice my body. All through that time, I was still looking for truth, capital T truth, that would help me understand. This is the same feeling that I had growing up religious, that there is a mechanism for truth, there is a way forward. And if I just figure out the way to conceptualize the world and make meaning of the world, then I will be in a state of greater liberation. I took the same model into my pursuit of health, that I'm looking for the understanding of health. I want to understand what the right way to approach the body mind is. I want to understand how I can be healthy. And you can obviously see there's a comparison here within both pursuits, and they're both noble pursuits, to care deeply about how to make meaning in the world, and also how to survive as someone who's also experiencing suffering in one's own mental state. So the pursuit of these two things, though, and the attachment to the pursuit of those two things is one thing. The attachment to there being a single right answer became destructive in my life. And it was confronted very strongly at the age of 23, in the loss of my brother to suicide. An act like this, an experience like this is grounding. And I use that word because it's also very feels like an implosion. Feels like things falling apart. That's what it has felt like things falling apart, like things breaking open. But at the same time, there's something very grounding about it, because it took this outer exploration of mine of greater truth, greater knowledge, greater understanding, greater health, which I was expecting to be like a silver string that I could just pull out and just put on like a gown. I found it and I got it and I'm just in it. To not only the reality that I know way less about those two things than I think that I do, but also that the consequences of them, the consequences of unknowing, are so painful. And also that knowing wouldn't take away certain experiences of life that are painful. Like death already is an experience of life that I can't stop. But suicide and the mental health crisis, that does not feel like it needs to be fixed. Fixed as in consistent in the way that it is. It hasn't always been this way. So not only was I grounded, was I forced into grounding because of that, but also because of the mirror now that I needed to, or felt the need to place upon myself as someone who did not get diagnosed formally with this, and also grew up in the same space with this person, and really has undergone my own experience with mental health. So I share this story because I chose to become a relationship coach because I care about relationships and I care about intimacy. And I can feel this fear in my system shifting and changing as I talk about relationships, because there's so much joy here. There's so much lightness here. There's so much openness here. This also was a space where I felt so much pain, but it's been a pain that I've felt courageous to try to find truth within. And while there's great difficulty in the space of relationship and relating to people, at the core of my system has always been this delight that I'm connected to something bigger than myself and more than myself. And this delight is what motivates me to explore meaning and believe that I'll find something, even if it doesn't follow the frameworks that I was shown, and believe that I'll find health, even in the midst of me going through my own journey with mental health specifically. Physical health, that always came naturally and easily. With mental health, it was harder. So I share all this to say, even though I'm choosing to work on relationships and I'm motivated by this greater, deeper love that I believe is possible for humankind, I come at it from the place of deep reverence for the body mind and recognition that there is so much unknown there. And when I joined this coaching program, or to pursue this journey of being a relationship and love and sex coach, this was birthed out of travel and experience in meeting people and the desire and the faith that there's greater levels of intimacy that could exist than I was shown. And also, on the other side of that, On the other side of that, I still had my own relationship to self that I was going through. So on the one hand, deep faith, that relationship can look different. And then, of course, my own personal mental health journey. And because everything I've always done, for the most part, has to do with working in groups, I just envisioned I would come on this space, in this space, and I would begin to work on sexual education and emotional health and these larger relational issues. And instead, what I began to learn was coaching, which was what I had signed up for, but I just didn't think that would be the focus. I thought I will focus on groups. This is the place I've always been. I grew up in a giant family. I like to lead groups. I like to lead teams. I want to help people work together. It's like always the core theme. And I even had resistance to working specifically on like a business and around coaching people one-on-one. And when I was asked like, what's my vision for coaching? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what's the purpose of it fully. And then pretty quickly, as I began learning and coaching people, something amazing happened, which was this I actually have like chills over in my body. And I'm pointing out what I feel right now because this is still new, working in a somatic way. So I'll get into that in a moment. These chills are, so in the same way that I can hold all this fear around my mental health and my relationship to my mind, I can hold these chills and this ease because I had been on this journey of trying to heal my mind and got to a place where I was like, yeah, I'm good enough to take a next step in my career, to come back into the world after this depression and retreat and grieving and COVID. And then I was thinking, I'm coming here to focus on relationships and changing the paradigm for how people date and the future of marriage and how we understand what our roles are in the world and break gender norms, etc. And then I got immersed in this process of deep listening to people and somatic experiencing, and which is connecting to what the body is going through. And the reason I'm like, I'm amazed is that I've always been a creative person. I've always been an imaginative person. That's why I can see another possibility for us in relationship. I did not know that tapping into the body could be a visual creative experience. And when I began coaching people and when I began getting coached and being trained to feel my body and what's happening, and my belly's contracting, my heart's beating, my body has chills, I began to learn a method for both listening to these parts and actually seeing what's the information here, what's the wisdom here, but also letting these parts connect and speak with each other. And it became this most amazing, beautiful experience of actually helping the body mind work together. And I'd done other coaching, I'd done therapy, but I wasn't able to really get, for me as someone who's feeling emotions on such a deep level, I wasn't able to really bring in my deeper layer, my deeper experience of what's happening. And so this process became a way that I was both starting to experience myself more deeply, but also pull in these other parts of myself that I had always just looked for solutions in religion from, because I grew up religious. And even when I left my pursuit of Christianity, I was always pursuing a spiritual path, because I thought I want to get in touch with what's larger than life. And aside from creativity and art, spirituality is the other place for that. It's the evaluation and exploration of what is beyond the physical body and the physical life. But what somatics began to teach me was how to experience these other layers by actually going into the body instead of coming out of the body. And a lot of spiritual places will tend to take you out of the body. So you want to overcome your desire or overcome your physical reality, as opposed to actually go deeper into and listen to what's happening. Even my fitness background, which I've always been someone who loves the body, but even my fitness background wasn't really getting me at the intelligence of the body. It was teaching me more about how to train and help bring energy into the body through taking care of it and being more receptive to it. But it wasn't really teaching me how to recognize the emotional and physical experience in union and in relationship. So I share all this to say that coaching has been something that's relatively new for me to understand. And this style of coaching, the Vita method, created by Layla Martin, which is a combination of Eastern philosophies involving Tantra, Taoism, these Chinese and Indian medicine systems that deal with energy, paired with interpersonal neurobiology, like Dan Siegel, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, these trauma researchers who are looking at how the body keeps the score. This method is relatively new and it's not a scientifically implemented method yet because it deals with spiritual practices, but it's still an evolving approach in the world right now, embodiment period, somatics period. And I feel so much nervousness in some ways about working with people on relationship issues because embedded in relationship issues, embedded in issues around sexuality, there is pain and trauma. And I am not going to be able to be the person to deal with someone in their full scope all the time. But that becomes where boundaries come in. As a coach, as a mental health worker, is I cannot be the person for everyone, but I also have worked deeply and intensely with my mind and body. And I look at relationship as a very personal experience. And so this is the last part that I'll put in my journey right now, which is that the year my brother died, I decided to marry myself. And I'm coming up on my 4-year anniversary with myself this year. And this act was an act of no longer wanting to externalize these desires of satisfaction and depth and partnership always through someone else. I could notice how many sacrifices and shifts I would make for myself in the presence of someone else, but actually direct that level of loving attention toward myself. And as I hit year 4, I feel more in love with myself and more afraid of myself. And I use the word fear in the same way traditional spiritual texts use the word fear to describe fear and love. It's a very scary thing to look at yourself. It's a very scary thing to go more fully into yourself. And I acknowledge that many women my age throughout history have historically been married and had children at this time. And I genuinely feel alone at times in this journey. I've chosen to date at times, but I've also had to, I made this choice for a reason. It came through pain, not through pleasure. So I've also had to heal my own things. But I also, even so, being in relationship and being out of relationship and choosing to be married to myself, there's a level of commitment that I have to myself that that welcomes curiosity and unknown and creates fear at times because like going on a hike, it's not like the fear goes away once you go on the hike. Actually, it can get worse depending on how big the ledges are or how steep it is or what the terrain is or what the weather conditions are, all of which you have no control over. But the thing that's changing is just your commitment to yourself and the building up of I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and there's more here, and there's more here, and I did survive that, and I didn't know I'd survive that, and I still don't know that I'll survive that. But look how far we've come. So I want to share this. I know this got longer than intended, but I did feel like I needed to just come out and speak some of this because I desire to go to grad school. I desire to have a more, to have more qualifications under my belt to work with the human mind. But I also believe that it's foolish to assume that someone with more traditional accreditation is the best person to work with you based on what you need. So the things that I am great to work with on are being in the unknown and really centering on a vision of where you want to go, because that's my creative self. And my creativity and storytelling have actually been huge tools in me getting through difficult situations. And it's been a journey to actually learn how to plug into the body, because as amazing as storytelling is, sometimes it takes it out of our experience of reality. But that is one of my skills, is that I can tend to see and envision. So I can help you envision when we're in these places where you're not so clear on what could it look like. I also have a lot of faith in a future standard of love that we're not living at yet. I'm very grounded in a spiritual framework which is unrooted to a specific religious text, and create a lot of openness for that to be explored. And I also train in physical fitness as well, and I'm completing my personal training and nutrition coach certifications through NASM. So I bring this, I want to make these complex things more digestible approaches to the table, while also acknowledging boundaries, acknowledging this is where I'm at in my journey now. I do desire some greater certifications, but I also have done a lot of inner work. And I also believe that where we're at currently, so long as science and spirituality are still feeling a little bit at odds with each other, there's kind of a growing phase that we're going through right now as a world, while we try to understand what are we talking about: spirit, mind, consciousness, body, soma, and what framework are we going to use to help us move forward? And with that, where are we going as a world? And are we going to actually prioritize well-being, or are we just going to medicate the mind, or medicate, or give easy answers? This is not me being against medication. It's just acknowledging the kind of put the thing in to get the result rather than shift the system. Are we just going to keep people indoctrinated in a culture instead of practices and rules that are highly destructive to majority of the humans on the planet and the earth itself? Or are we going to focus on a human consciousness that actually has the capacity to serve, rewire, rethink, and reinvent the world? And so that's also my more radical perspective underneath my coaching, and why I have the courage to call what I do liberatory love. Because the practices that I'm bringing in are coming from the work that I'm doing to help my soul survive in this world, which for me is deeply rooted in creating greater peace. I cannot promote health if I am not promoting a world in which war is abolished, in which slavery is abolished. Just like mentally and emotionally, there's so much that can be transformed within our system, or just needs a renewed relationship. There's also things that we've outgrown that actually need an upgrade. And there are many qualities to the human collective consciousness right now that also need an upgrade, and are creating extraordinary destruction on a physical level and on a earth and social systems level, which then ends up impacting the physical level again, because we cannot disconnect those two. So these are all the things that I bring to the table. And I'm opening this, quote unquote, pulling back the curtains on this, because prior to announcing this, I just was talking about the Fibonacci sequence, the gold standard, which is my expression from a design perspective. From a design perspective, there is beauty, there is more truth that you can put a finger on. That does this work or not work? Does it hold the weight or not hold the weight? Does it obey certain principles and the laws of design? Yes or no? And in that regard, there's a level of quality that can be identified. Whereas in our own mental emotional system, there's a level of quality that can't be identified yet. It is a felt sense. It is a knowing. We have a knowing when something works well. We have a knowing when we feel healthy. We have a knowing when we feel alive, but there's not necessarily words for it. And so we're not even on a shared standard about it. But my inner knowing is that there is greater liberation, there is greater thriving, that we don't just need to survive in this world, but many people are in a state of surviving because of the conditions we've created. But there's new conditions that can be created. But we also need to have the consciousness and awakeness to actually create those conditions, which is a collaborative process. So my hope is for liberatory love coaching to be a place where I can help people rise into the level of consciousness in them that's desiring to be expressed through themselves and through partnership, because partnership becomes a place where these polarities in us can actually come out and thrive if we know how to welcome it. And then long term, be not just a space of coaching, but a place of research and devotion. And in the educational space, we don't use the word devotion, but in yoga, the study of knowledge in some ways through the body, devotion is one of the paths. And I believe devotion is a recognition that we are not the only people. Or let me phrase it like this: we are not, the energy we're bringing is not the only energy that exists. We use the phrase energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but that doesn't mean that all the energy is being used right now. And devotion to me is a recognition that through our attention and pursuit of greater love gets to be actualized through us in new ways. And I don't think that's limited to science, to spirituality, to people who use the word love or don't use the word love. And pursuing somatic work is a way that I can help open up the portal of someone's own heart, but also the portals of all of us on the earth, to help welcome this in our own spaces, in our own ways, uniquely based on who we are and what we have to do here. With that, I'll just invite a closing practice, which is to really notice your own spectrum of emotion. By emotion, I mean energy in motion. So rather than naming it as sadness or happiness, just notice what sensations might have occurred throughout this conversation. That wasn't a conversation, this mini lecture. Notice, did hairs on your arm raise? Did your stomach turn? I'll speak for myself. I have hairs raised on my arms. I have turning in my stomach. I have beating in my heart. I have an ache in my low back. I have a tightness in my neck. I have a groundedness in the center of my being. I have a vulnerability in my heart. That feels like a lightness and a breathlessness. The more attuned you start to get to the sensations that are being experienced in your body, the more they come. And you have the opportunity to embrace the sophistication and complexity of this and actually begin to direct it in some way, so that it becomes not only something you're aware of, but something that becomes the guidance system for a more alive and liberated version of yourself, not through your own individuality, but through your capacity to relate more wholly, more holistically, more fully with the people around you. And this, I believe, is a redefinition of the word holy. Holy, not just used in the ways that Holy Scriptures, historically Holy Scriptures uplift as being beyond this world, but as being so deeply in your experience. and also so deeply aware of your own inner consciousness. That choice emerges. This is human creativity. This is human imagination. This is human potential. And me sitting here talking about it doesn't mean that I know where it goes or what happens next. It just means that I'm in devotion to the thing that is capable of being recreated in me. And I'm humble enough to acknowledge that there's components of it that I don't grasp or understand yet, but that understanding can expand and emerge. And my curiosity about it helps create it. And I want to be in a world where more people are directly accessing the parts of themselves that give them true power. And I want to be in conversations that hold greater meaning and vulnerability and depth and openness. And I want to be free of having to lie to myself. I want to get to play, which involves make believe. But I don't want to have to lie to survive. Thank you.